The Nintendo Entertainment System, a necessity for gracious living.
When it comes to the world of console gaming, Nintendo is certainly considered a legendary company. In the field, they have successfully delivered to us an impressive number of iconic games and systems, but despite these glorious accolades, they are still far from perfect. Over the years, Nintendo has been consistently criticised for bringing to us inferior online gaming experiences compared to what has been available from the competition, with even the more modern Switch Online service often being criticised for not only how restrictive it is, but its terrible value for money in comparison to what gamers get on, say, PlayStation and Xbox services. With such a poor reputation regarding online play now being very much embedded, it would be easy to conclude that Nintendo has always been lacking in such an area. However, this simply isn't the case, which brings us around to today's largely forgotten chapter in gaming history. Nintendo consoles have been online years before PlayStation or Xbox consoles even existed. So, without further ado, let's head back to the 8-bit era of gaming and look at where all of this began.
I am Lady Decade, and this is the story of the Nintendo Entertainment System's lost secret add-on.
The PlayStation Network and Xbox Live services have been rather expertly implemented, forever changing the way console games are enjoyed. Such subscriptions are now seen as cornerstones of console gaming. Comparatively, Nintendo's online gaming presence has been mostly questionable at best, which makes the situation all the more perplexing when you learn that their online story started way back in the 1980s. But this raises the question, how would you hook up an NES to get it online? The first part of this mystery lies with the underside of the console itself. Hidden beneath the brutalist designed box, a removable cover can be located concealing a secret. Removing this curious covering reveals a plastic tab that, when broken off with a Phillips head screwdriver, exposes the system's unused expansion port. A port that was sadly never commercially used. Now, the most obvious use for this port, looking at other systems such as the Sega Mega Drive with its Mega CD or Nintendo 64 with its Nintendo 64 DD as examples, would be to use this expansion port to connect the base Nintendo Entertainment System with a console add-on. But, as we know, the NES never got one. While this is the case, over in Japan on the other hand, the Nintendo Famicom, which was largely the same as the NES, did get a system add-on, the Famicom Disk System. However, it was quickly phased out commercially after a combination of issues had emerged. Essentially, the price to produce cartridges fell, piracy of floppy disk-based games was rampant, and consumers noticed the discs were not as dependable as traditional cartridges either. And that's before we even account for the smaller issues, such as disc-writer kiosks taking up unnecessary space in stores and other factors. Either way, the port that could have been used for an NES disk system to sit beneath, the device was never manufactured.
However, a further use was concocted.
While rumours would run rampant in playgrounds that perhaps this secret wizard sleeve could be used to insert and play Sega Master System games, this was obviously nothing but cobblers. But what it would potentially have been used for was to slot a modem into. A modem for this mysterious slot was very much in the works and was known as the Teleplay modem device. The Teleplay modem was not developed by just anyone, but none other than Keith Rupp and Nolan Bushnell. Yes, that Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari Incorporated. The Teleplay modem was primarily designed to provide online play between NES users. However, it also possessed capabilities for compatibility with the newly released Sega Genesis as well. Think about that for a moment, that's absolutely mental. The prototype of this device was unveiled at the 1992 Consumer Electronics Show and received a somewhat favourable reception. Known at the time as the Ayoto modem, the device featured a staggering maximum speed of 300 bits per second, which made the device too slow to have been able to render full-screen NES quality graphics.
So a lot of work was clearly needed to make this thing viable.
Nolan Bushnell's involvement in this project sadly ended up being fairly short-lived. However, Keith Rupp, on the other hand, would continue to work on the add-on without him. Under his leadership, he would successfully manage to increase the terrible speed of the device to 2,400 bits per second, but he didn't stop there. During this time frame, Rupp would conceive another idea, which was also many decades ahead of its time. Essentially, Rupp intended this device to feature the ability to allow crossplay of certain titles between users of both a Nintendo Entertainment System and Sega Genesis. That is quite literally an earth-shattering concept. None of us will forget how bitter the rivalry between Nintendo and Sega appeared to be at the time. This, to many, would have seemed almost unfathomable, especially when we consider that crossplay between different hardware still isn't even that common a thing as far as long as 2022. The Teleplay had 3 planned games developed that were intended to take advantage of this coveted crossplay feature. These were Battlestorm, Terran Wars and Sea Battle. However, like the Teleplay itself, none of these titles saw the light of day. Instead, to the absolute surprise of no one, the 2 highly conservative Japanese companies, Nintendo and Sega, would both catch wind of this idea and both outright refused to license the Teleplay modem, both opposing dirty crossplay functionality between each other's hardware. The stubborn, paranoid Japanese businessmen hindered further progress being made in the field. The hopes and dreams of children everywhere were brutally shattered.
What predictable fuddy-duddies.
So while that brings the tale of the Teleplay modem to a close, this isn't where the story of 8-bit Nintendo Online ends quite yet. As in the home of the Nintendo Famicom, things were transpiring rather differently. Nintendo had dabbled with connecting the Famicom to the internet as early as 1988. That's when they decided to have a go at creating their own online peripheral for the system. They would dub this system add-on simply the Famicom modem, which was created to offer online services and connect people. Weirdly enough, despite the fact that this service existed on the Famicom, it was never actually used for playing games, making this a very different venture from that of the US-axed Teleplay modem. The most gaming-related thing that you could achieve with this device was that it allowed players to access the Super Mario Club, which contained reviews and previews online.
Pretty cool for 1988. Most people were watching the radio back then.
This modem was a result of a collaboration between Nintendo and a Japanese brokerage called Nomura Securities. The modem focuses predominantly on banking and stock trading. God, how excruciatingly fun for the children. The modem was born out of Nomura simply looking for a more high-tech and modern way for their customers to be able to peruse stock and carry out trades.
To be fair, it does make sense that Nintendo weren't totally behind something so cutting edge.
Beyond Nomura appealing to businessmen with more money than sense, it is a bit of an absurd device, really. I mean, what's in this for Nintendo? Did they think that this would help boost sales? Let's make an all-in-one device that offers gaming for kids and a bit of banking for mummy and stock trading for dada. It brings an all-new meaning to the name family computer. The Famicom modem peripheral could be inserted into the top of the Famicom by being placed into the cartridge slot. Like the PC Engine, it would use a card-based format, which when combined with the modem, the Famicom could connect to a server through a standard network cable provided by Nomura. This allowed the user to indulge in checking stocks, reading the news, weather reports, and finding game cheats, amongst other things. The now largely forgotten modem also came with its own specialised controller, which had additional buttons to a regular Famicom pad. These buttons were numeric and could be used to interact with a server and menus. There was the intention for games to be eventually downloaded using it, with near the end of its lifespan some classic Famicom games even being converted and made into a digital format, but such a concept never came to fruition. Nintendo would finally have a service available in Japan whereby games could be downloaded, but not until 1995. This would be through the use of the Super Famicom Satellaview add-on, a device that I have covered extensively through several videos on this channel, looking at both the hardware and some of its exclusive Zelda and Mario games.
So check those ones out if you haven't already.
As for the Famicom modem, with its failing to deliver on the gaming front, the modem ended up being, understandably, a bit of a flop. Despite the functionality it had, there were issues with connectivity stability, along with the greater issue of the Japanese stock market crashing during the hardware's life cycle. This caused the service itself to go bankrupt, which is ironic considering it was a service that predominantly existed so that users could check how their stock was doing. Nintendo also primarily marketed the Famicom as a children's toy, so businessmen and other people who would have been interested in early internet banking and trading stocks and shares likely preferred using a real PC to perform such tasks anyway. Despite all of the modem's failings and shortcomings, it did have one more feature up its sleeve, which I have yet to touch on, as I felt I would save the best until last.
So banking and finance is pretty boring. So how about gambling?
While Nomura ended up pulling out of a deal with Nintendo, the modem itself was not completely dead yet. You see, Nintendo found a new partnership to support the hardware that would come in the form of the Japanese Racing Association. This was the company that was responsible for horse racing and betting in the country over the period, with the modem then becoming a portal to be able to place bets on races from the comfort of Japanese gamblers' homes.
So, not exactly the family-friendly endeavour that Nintendo usually prides themselves on.
Gambling may not exactly seem like the kid-friendly escapade one would associate with modern Nintendo, but rather quirkily, this brought Nintendo back to its original roots. You see, way back when the company first started, they were initially selling playing cards. Playing cards, I may add, were illegal back in 1889 when the Japanese entity first began trading. Anyway, rather amusingly, gambling did cause the modem to have a minor surge in sales for a period of a few years in the early 90s, even after the discontinuation of the modem itself. Allegedly, more than a third of all online horse racing bets were placed via this Famicom format. This meant that, once upon a time, unlike now, there was a period in which Nintendo consoles were doing extremely innovative things online. Before the official discontinuation of the modem, Nintendo did try to test the US market with this concept on the NES. This was achieved by enrolling the Minnesota State Lottery and using scratch cards, allowing the lottery to be played using the modem inserted into the NES. This prototype, of course, ended up being scrapped very quickly, which can be theorised that when it comes to gambling, at least Nintendo of America was even more conservative regarding the topic than Nintendo of Japan. Americans view gambling as a lot more taboo than much of the world, and there was a small public outcry from both parents and legislators who were concerned about how easy it would be for children to get addicted to gambling.
I mean, would somebody please think of the children?
So, keeping these thoughts in mind, these issues continue to persist in gaming, with many campaigning for the removal of predatory microtransactions in mobile games, as well as the banning of loot boxes in AAA titles. I guess in some ways these practices are a bit more sinister, as they, in some cases, genuinely are aimed at children, but I doubt little Jimmy would have been buying his lottery tickets on the NES. So that just about rounds up today's story. I hope that you now have a better idea regarding how the NES's secret slot could have been put to good use. All manner of interesting things could have been jammed in there, and that would have been exciting for all of those involved. So with that said,
I am Lady Decade, and that was the story of the Nintendo Entertainment System's secret add-on. Well, if you enjoyed this video, then like, subscribe, comment and hit that notification bell. And as is usual at the end of my videos, I do like to answer questions from my Patreon backers. So today's question is, from Boyd Chan, and he asks, what's your take on Nintendo having more than one bite of the retro cherry with classic games such as Virtual Console on the Wii, the classic mini consoles, and also the Switch Online subscription service? Is Nintendo milking it for all it's worth, or simply doing what the market will tolerate? Well, as this episode has been filmed in front of a live studio audience over on Twitch, we've just been having quite a lengthy discussion about this. And the long and short of it is Nintendo are basically greedy bastards, because you get the Virtual Console on the Wii and obviously the classic minis, and over and over and over and over we are paying for these old games. So some of us have got these old games behind us in our game collections, and some of us are just buying the same games over and over on these services. And then it's not even just Nintendo. I mean, I was just saying to chat, I've got The Witcher on several different platforms. I've got Skyrim on multiple platforms. I don't need to keep buying these games over and over. But the problem is that you're getting Nintendo shutting down these old servers, so we're losing games that we've paid for. So it just comes across as greedy, yet they can get away with doing it because they're Nintendo, and because we are essentially, the vast majority of us are basically Nintendo fanboys. So they will just keep doing it over and over and over, and we'll just keep falling for it every single time. Because as much as I might moan about the Switch Online services, I'm still paying for it. So I can't even take the high ground on this, because I'm one of the mugs just like everyone else. So basically, if you would like to have your question answered at the end of one of my videos, then please consider backing my little channel over on Patreon. Thank you very much, and see you next time.